Story number 1. The Hoia Forest. I'm a huge skeptic of the paranormal. I believe that there is an explanation for everything strange and unusual. That's the kind of reason why I got into ghost hunting. You could say that I want to be proven wrong. I want to be made a believer. I have been to some of the most haunted places in the world, but none of them made me a true believer until I visited the Hoia Forest in Romania. The forest is famous for being one of the most haunted forests in the world. There are so many stories about paranormal activities and strange phenomena happening within the trees. I went there not believing in any of it. It's often been referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania due to so many people disappearing. I heard a story of a shepherd who went missing along with 200 sheep. He went into the forest and was never seen again. That, along with many other stories, is the reason I just had to go visit the forest and see this all for myself. It was a crisp winter morning when my guide drove up to the parking lot just outside the entrance to the forest trails. The trees were strange there. I was told they were hundreds of years old, but they looked so young. The trunks were twisted and bulging in weird ways. An eerie fog hung low over the ground, and I honestly got a bad feeling the moment we got there. My main fear was getting lost, which is how I explain so many people disappearing inside the forest. It's a large area, and the trees are so large and thick that it would be easy for someone to lose their way. So, I stuck close to my guide as he led me down the trails. I was filming myself for my family back home. For the first half of the trip, nothing happened. Despite the eerie feeling, which was most likely caused by the early morning fog, the forest was just a forest. However, as I continued to check my phone and found out it was well into the afternoon, the morning fog hadn't faded. It was still as thick as ever, covering the floor to the point where I couldn't even see my own feet. If it weren't for my guide, I would have lost the trail already. At some point, I was filming a unique-looking tree trunk when I spotted something in the distance. It was a slim, tall figure. It was so dark, as if it was just a shadow being cast, but there was nothing to cast it and nothing for it to be casted on. The shadow was just standing in the middle of the forest. I watched it for a moment, thinking it was just another person exploring the forest. They didn't move. The whole time I looked at them, they just stood there. I think the weirdest part about it is how still they were. If you ever watched someone standing in the distance, there's always a subtle movement. They will sway or flinch, but this person was unusually still. The longer I stared, the weirder they looked. Soon, they didn't resemble a person at all. It was just a dark blob standing in the middle of the forest. I couldn't pull my eyes away. I had this knot forming in my stomach, and it was growing and getting worse. I felt sick. I didn't want to look away. I was terrified that if I looked away, they would disappear. In that moment, I heard twigs snapping behind me. That sudden sound showed me how quiet it was, and it also made me jump up and spin round. It was just the tour guide stepping in the bushes behind me. He checked if I was okay, and I nodded. I turned back to where the shadow was standing, and a shiver ran up and down my spine. It was gone. I ran forward to where the shadow was standing. I could hear my tour guide freaking out behind me. I didn't care. At this point, I'm trying to debunk anything that could be paranormal. I checked everywhere, but I couldn't find anyone. The forest was empty aside from me and my tour guide chasing me down. I couldn't explain it. I looked away for only a second. There was no way that a person could have disappeared in that amount of time. It didn't look like a person. The image in my mind was a tall, slim, black blob. The more I thought about it, the more it looked nothing like a human. It was just a thing. It had no shape, no face, and no color whatsoever. I still can't explain it, even to this day. If anything has made me a believer, it was that moment. Story number 2. Karosta Prison by Candlelight. You could say I'm mad or have a crazy idea of fun, but I love going on haunted tours. There are places that are considered to be the most haunted in the world, and you can go on tours of those places. The Karosta Naval Port Prison is on that list. It's considered to be extremely haunted, and it's not difficult to see why. I believe that places become haunted after being exposed to a lot of negative energy. During its time as a military prison, Karosta saw a lot of negative energy. Its history is a horrific one. Prisoners there were treated horribly. They were tortured and brutally murdered. No prisoner would even dare to escape because of the punishment that awaited them if they failed. It's no wonder why today it is one of the most haunted places in the world. The tour was amazing. The tour guide took a huge group of us through the whole prison. They gave us the history of the place and explained what every building was used for when it was operational. The end of the tour was the best part for me, and it was also the most terrifying. I paid for the full tour, and that meant I was going to be left alone in one of the cells with nothing but a candle to light my way. It was pitch black. There was a cold draft coming in, but I couldn't make out where it was coming from. I was sitting on the bed, but it was mostly metal wires and springs at that point. It creaked slightly under my weight. I was freaking out, but I was also enjoying myself. My eyes were playing tricks on me. I thought I was seeing shadows in the darkness. For a moment, I thought a man was peeking at me from the doorway, but when I raised my candle up, the shadow disappeared. I stood up and decided to walk out of the room. I wasn't sure how long I had been sitting there. I was only supposed to be there for an hour. I grabbed the walls with one hand and walked down the long hallway. I passed many other cells on my way. At some point, I didn't feel like I was alone. I glanced over my shoulder and used the candlelight as best I could. I was in complete darkness. With the candlelight, I could barely see my own hand stretched out in front of me. I heard a voice behind me. It was a raspy whisper. It felt like a cold breath down the back of my neck. I spun round, but there was nothing there. As I turned my back, there was another voice from behind me again. I turned around once again, but there was nothing there. I couldn't tell what the whispers were saying, but I could hear a voice saying something to me. I looked down the hall and stretched my candle out in front of me. Still, I couldn't see anything. "Is there someone there?" I called down the hall. My voice echoed down the hallway and something answered. I could swear I heard the same raspy voice reply, "Hello." I backed away from the voice. I couldn't see anyone. There was no one in there with me, but something was talking to me. At this point, tears were building up in my eyes. I was there to have fun, but it was quickly turning into the most terrifying experience of my life. I turned back to where the voice had come from, and I waited. I watched and listened. I was waiting to hear the voice again. For the longest time ever, there was only silence. In that silence, I heard a breath, and my candle went out. I screamed my head off. I don't think I have ever screamed that loud before. I was plunged into complete darkness, and I was convinced that there was someone in that hallway with me, someone that just blew out my candle. The tour guides rushed to my aid. The lights turned on, and they were asking me so many questions. I didn't know what to tell them. I knew there was something in there with me. They kept trying to assure me that I was the only one in the building, but I know what I heard, and there was someone or something there with me. Story number 3. My experience at the most haunted house in the world. There are a lot of places in the world that are considered to be haunted. It takes a lot for something to be considered the most haunted place in the world. There has to be a lot of different people experiencing the paranormal in the same area for anything like that to happen. House number 24 at Jelen-Rynek in Poland is known as one of the most haunted houses in the world. Anyone who has ever lived in that house has left in the middle of the night because of poltergeist activity or ghost sightings. Ever since then, it's open for ghost hunters and adventurers to stay the night. It's a challenge that I couldn't pass up. The tour is only open to groups of 2 or more, so I convinced my friend to stay overnight with me. We had a lot of fun throughout the night. Not much happened, and we were trying to get things to happen. We brought all sorts of equipment, and we tried to communicate with whatever was living in the house, but for some reason we didn't get anything for most of the night. We went to bed, disappointed that the house might not actually be haunted. Because my friend and I didn't believe the place was haunted anymore, we decided to sleep in separate rooms. That night, something woke me up. My eyes snapped open and I looked up at a pitch-black ceiling. I'm not sure what woke me up. I lied completely still in the bed, and it took me a moment to realize that it wasn't my choice to just lie there. I couldn't move. There was a heavy pressure on my chest. It was as if something was sitting on top of me, but I was looking up at the ceiling and there was nothing on my chest. Once I realized that I was fully awake but I couldn't move, I also noticed this feeling tugging at the back of my mind. I wasn't alone. It felt like there was someone in the room with me. I couldn't even turn my head. I was forced to stare at the ceiling, and I felt like there was something staring at me in the darkness. That was when something grabbed my foot. I opened my mouth and I was able to scream. The moment the scream left my mouth, it was as if I woke up for the first time. I sat up in the bed, still screaming. My friend rushed into the room to check on me. I couldn't even explain to him what happened because I couldn't even understand what happened. Something was in the room with me, and I swear it touched my foot. To this day, I'm not sure what happened in that room, but I will never go back to that house again. Story number 4. The trees are watching. I live in Romania, and I've only ever gone to the Hoia forest once in my adult life. That one visit was enough of an experience for me for a lifetime. I knew the place pretty well from when my parents took me there when I was younger. I went alone, and I think that's the part that makes the whole experience that much more terrifying. I was walking along the trail in the late afternoon. Not a lot of people like being out there when it's even slightly dark, so I knew it would be quiet. I had my flashlight with me, and up until that point, I wasn't a true believer of all that paranormal stuff. I didn't think anything could happen to me. It started getting dark, so I started heading back towards my car. It was at this point that I heard something behind me. It was like a soft footstep crunching down on the dried leaves covering the ground. The whole time I'd been hearing my own footsteps do the same, but I knew for certain that this one footstep that echoed out behind me was independent of my own. I spun round on my heels and shined my flashlight in the direction of the footstep. I didn't see anyone directly in the light beam, but out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a face peeking at me from behind a tree. I shot the flashlight over there. Once the beam hit the tree, the light was gone. I can't even begin to explain the face I saw. It was small, like that of a child's. Its eyes were wide and yellow as if it was sick. They didn't seem to blink the whole time it stared at me. Then there's the feeling I got while it was looking at me. When my eyes met its, I just knew that even though it looked like a child, it wasn't human. I turned back and practically raced down the trail back towards my car. I continued to hear footsteps echoing out behind me. It was following me. I just kept moving as fast as I could without letting the underbrush trip me. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to risk seeing those eyes staring at me from behind a tree again. I'm convinced that thing followed me all the way to my car. I heard the footsteps in the forest even as I was running through the parking lot. As I turned my car around and headed towards the exit, I saw it again. It was waiting for me by the entrance to the trail. Those wide, yellow eyes just stared at me as I drove away. I don't want to go back there ever again, because I know it will be waiting for me.